With the Advantex subfloor assembly, you can be sure that you're building a reputation on something stronger. And the best builders, well, they may always stand apart, but they never stand alone. So ask yourself, are you bringing your A game?
Welcome to the UnBuild It podcast. I'm Jake Bruton, and today on the podcast for a Q&A episode, that's question and answer for those of you that aren't good with acronyms. Is that an acronym?
I'm Steve Basic, architect.
And also I'm joined by Steve Basic. I'm confused. Maybe that was Peter Yost and Steve Basic is here.
Yes.
Okay. So these are cold Q&A questions. I haven't even read them. I glanced at a couple of them, but most of them were reading cold.
This is like cold climate Q&A?
No. Sorry. Leave it to the guy from the People's Republic of Vermont who now lives in the Democratic Republic of New Hampshire.
I emigrated to New Hampshire.
Now he has that immigrant mentality. He's got to tell everybody. These are cold as in I don't know what the question is.
Oh.
And or
that works out because I don't know them either, Jake.
Them yet, so there's no cheating on my part this time. So the first question comes from Steve C. We're just going to jump right into it. Good morning.
Good morning.
Or good day, depending on when you're listening to this, I guess.
Good evening.
We're going to jump right into it. This is a three-part question from Steve C. One, the first part's for you, Peter. Do you have Jake as a beneficiary in your will? I'm not making this up. Steve has we're waiting for an answer. This is a question that we answer.
Okay. That's easy to answer.
Okay. Number two is Jake, for me. Would you consider selling Trust But Verify t-shirts and maybe donate the proceeds to the military since you hate them?
Wow, I think this guy's
I've
good.
Misrepresented it in the podcast. It's not that I hate the military. It's that Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer in one movie is a little much for me.
There's a movie with Val Kilmer and
Top Gun.
Oh, I've heard that's a pretty good movie, though.
You led me right into that, you sucker. I got suckered into that one quick. Here's the real question, I'm guessing. What are your thoughts on mitered corners on exterior cladding? Are there better species of lumber for this than others? Any tips on a successful install are appreciated.
Ooh. This is for trim, like around windows.
Yeah, that's the implication that I see there. Mitered corners on exterior cladding. So it may be trim, it may be the actual cladding. So if we're talking about non-wood, we have like fiber cement. We have we'll call the OSB sidings non-wood as well.
Waswood.
We have Waswood. We have TruExterior. There's some things like that. Well, at my house we have I don't know if it's still called Artisan line, but it was James Hardy's like premier thick stuff that's like 5/8 of an inch thick. We did miter the 8-inch bevel around the outside corners. Horrible pain in the butt. Very hard to miter fiber cement to begin with. Very hard to get a tight looking miter. I will say that the section at my house I had hired our siding crew to do the siding, and they flaked halfway through and just never showed up again. And so my guys and I came and finished it. On the front where we did the work, it is a higher quality than on the back where the siding guys did the work, but that would be expected. Like my guys know how to install crown molding. The siding guys that were here
Well, the siding guys made money, you didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I've never ever done mitered corners exterior because it was almost always with wood back when I was carpenter full time.
But so I would guess that you would have to be in that. You have to have a thick material because that miter is going to be easier to conceal. If you have something that's a little bit larger, it's going to be a little easier to work with. It's going to be less likely to be flimsy so that you get a flat material to cut that miter. I would assume that we could do it with TruExterior, although we haven't tried it with TruExterior yet.
They have a whole bunch of examples in their gallery.
I mean, for the actual cladding, not not a trim, not a corner piece.
Yeah, no, for
Okay.
like their slope bevel and stuff, they have a ton of examples of their nickel gap and stuff with mitered corners.
Okay.
And I've talked to some people that are associated with Boral, and they say it's no problem, and they say it'll last a very long time and don't have a problem with it.
I mean, it's a dimensionally stable, non-absorptive product. Like, it shouldn't go anywhere.
It is, but it isn't, because we did have one project where it went wonky, and it went wonky real bad to the point where we pretty much had to tear off the elevation. Part of it was a very dark gray color, and a lot of it were smaller dimensional, like around the sill, around windows, where it went crazy, and we had to pull it all off.
And you're saying the dark color because of thermal contraction and
Low
expansion?
emissivity, yeah.
I wouldn't try it with a PVC product ever. There's just so much movement in PVC.
Yeah, I mean, and especially in climates that have, if you're in San Diego or someplace, I mean, even here, and when I say here, Missouri, I mean, it's 50 degrees in the winter, and in the summer it can be high 90s, 100. That temperature range really challenges almost anything we put on a building, and then the color you paint it.
And along with temperature changes, moisture content of the air, that is going to be reflected in the material to some extent.
Yeah.
Is this an aesthetics thing? People want to see exterior miters, because historically we don't see any. They They knew that you couldn't do that with wood.
Architecturally, it does look slick, but I'm on the fence, and like, is this a BS kind of like, let's just push something to do something it shouldn't do?
Right.
It's one of my newer sayings of, just because we can doesn't mean we should.
And we're trying to get constant contact for the whole length of the miter.
Yeah.
And I don't care what the material is, that kind of spells trouble if there's water dripping over it and getting into that joint at all.
Yeah. And I mean, there are ways. When we did the one of the passive houses down in Rhode Island, we actually stitched the corner so you see the end grain, and it just opposes each course.
Yeah, I've seen your slides on that. I like that.
And that it works. It's totally different aesthetic. The miter does look slick, but there we use spruce, and I would have been scared as hell to do that. But it's on a rain screen, and it doesn't move. And all the boards, I think we put vertical joints in for the purpose of limiting the size of the boards and having the ability to swap them out individually in case, because when we did it, we were on a very tight budget, and the builder's like, we could use spruce here. And it was 5/4, so it was a little thicker, but I was like, man, if that moves, and it's like, well, we'll just design the system to replace it. So we have these vertical lines that align with all the windows, and it's an open joint rain screen. So we still have vertical joints, but you can go on this house and replace any board, and the biggest one is probably like 7 feet long.
Yeah, so we're talking open joint and rain screen. Maybe if you give that amount of forgiveness to the system, you're okay with miters, but I would think, boy, if you don't give it forgiveness, it's going to come back to bite you.
Well, a lot of companies now, though, Boral, one, we're working with another company. What is it? The product is Acre, and the company's Modern Mill. So they make siding out of rice hull.
Huh.
Down in Mississippi. It's actually very, very cool.
You talked about this at IBS, didn't you? Or was that the
I might have.
Yeah, we stopped and saw it.
Yeah.
Congrats to Modern Mill. Those Rice Krispie treats they had at their booth were top notch.
Yeah, they were really good.
Now I remember when you guys, because I don't like Rice Krispie treats, so I get now I have full memory.
It's a clever snack to have on hand if you're
that's very
rice
clever.
husk.
And but that stuff, I mean, I've met with the salesman a couple times because we're going to use it on a number of different projects, and it is very slick siding.
I think rice hulls have silicon content, like sand content.
Well, I remember Dave Gauthier came, and I don't know if you remember, but he wanted to build building blocks out of rice hulls. I still have the little 2-inch cube.
Who did?
sample.
Did you say Gauthier?
Dave Gauthier.
Okay, that's what I thought. I've met
Structural insulated panel guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a lot of work with rice hulls.
Yeah, and because supposedly, and I never fact checked it, but supposedly it is the largest waste product by volume on the planet.
I would not be surprised.
Right.
Well, every little grain of rice makes
As a hull.
a piece of
And
waste.
there's just nobody's found out how to use it.
Well, that's one of the pozzolans that you can
That's a
substitute.
word I don't know.
Pozzolan is the component of concrete that we normally think of as served by Portland cement. But pozzolan would be like volcanic ash, blast furnace slag, and rice hulls, strangely enough, can be a substitute as the quote unquote glue for concrete.
It's the binder.
The stuff that comes
binder.
out of
There-
his
I've
head.
heard
Thank you.
Okay.
I've heard that before, and
Yeah.
in reference to the Roman Empire using.
Yep.
But who'd ever thought we'd bring in Roman Empire on?
And we're not even done yet.
I mean, not even done yet.
We're only on the first question.
That's why you come to us, people, because we go not only around the globe, we go along the z-axis of time.
And I've heard people say that we're sort of Byzantine, this whole thing.
Okay. Are we ready for our next question?
That's very Romanesque.
We are on fire. Fire, because that's
finally,
from volcanoes.
Well, Jake's being a little brutal.
Brutalist.
Oh, man.
The other part of that question that we just had, if we're talking about vertical corner boards that are overlaid corner boards, I wouldn't miter any outside corner board like that. It's a challenging situation.
Not that whole length. Boy.
But the solution that we've found quite a few times that it doesn't work aesthetically everywhere, but if we're doing like a 3-inch wide corner board each direction, we overlay. It's just a butt joint, and then where that butt joint is, we run a saw kerf on the face, and then we do a saw kerf that is the same proportion on the other side. Mm-hmm. So there's a little kerf line up both sides, and that kerf hides where those two boards are joined together, so that when they want to split, it splits in that kerf, and you don't see it.
Wow.
I always want to take 4x4s and just plow them out to get corners.
That's a challenge, though, because then depending on the grain, you could real easy get cupping.
No,
Yeah.
I know.
It's probably more challenging than doing them out of two pieces.
Before we jump to vertical, I did have one other point to make about the mitered corners on horizontal siding. Is we've concentrated on the siding, but in the last 20 years, it's pretty evident we've made some pretty good strides in adhesives and gluing technology. So the ability to not only cut the miter and have it hold, but the ability to glue it and have a glue that will actually be stronger than probably the wood fibers themselves.
Yep.
Type on 3.
Right? Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen, I was on a project
Just
in
once.
I see most
near
days.
home in New Hampshire, and there was a historic house that had feathered clapboards where they tapered literally to almost the thickness of a feather, and so that's how they lapped the cladding. Have
Yeah,
you ever
that
seen
way they
that?
can move and just keep sliding back.
Exactly
and forth.
so.
Don't they call
I
it
had never
it's
seen
not
that
a
before.
scarf joint, but there is a name for that joint. It's not scarf. Scarf is one that interlocks, I believe. But there is a name for that. But I mean, that's how like a lot of old structures.
had
and
never
stuff
seen it before. Super
done.
clever.
Yeah,
But it was incredibly high quality, tight grained wood. It was, you couldn't do it with,
well,
sloppy-
yeah. The cedar
sloppy
clapboard that was put on a house 100 years ago was probably cut from a 500-year-old tree.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
you do need that
it's-
tight grain.
Okay. Next piece. The next question is from Jason L. He is,
hello, Jason.
and he is in Mount Desert Island, Maine.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you know
one of
it?
my
Art
favorite
school
places
is-
in the world.
That art school is up there. What is it? Yeah. It's a whole series of buildings that cascade down the rocky cliff, and they're all connected by these ramps and stuff. Yeah, we had to study it in
Oh, I didn't know
architecture
that.
school.
Acadia,
It's very
Mount
cool.
Desert Island.
Okay. I'm abbreviating his question. There's a 5-paragraph long question. We'll go to the next to last paragraph. One of our upcoming projects will be using Zip R9 panel, and I'm curious what your best practice is for the edge of the panels at the window and door openings. I'm proposing that we picture frame each opening with an 1.5-inch block, removing the 1.5 inches of the insulation at the opening for a solid connection for the window flanges. This will be time consuming, and I question whether it's absolutely necessary. We did find that the installation screws that we used previously on our Anderson French door lands right behind the insulation layer and blocking is necessary at those locations. So
I got an answer.
The question is, do we omit the foam at the opening so that the flange or the brick mold screw goes in and actually hits something hard and we're not compressing?
So you're bucking the window by removing the foam.
Yeah, so you're bucking the window underneath the zip panel.
Correct.
That's the wrong way to do it, Jason. The correct way to do it is to oversize so when I do windows, there are 3 dimensions across the window. There's the unit dimension, the rough opening, and the 2x opening. So the unit dimension, let's just say it's 2 feet wide. The rough opening is 2'1" for a European window. They ask for a 1/2 inch perimeter. And then the 2x rough opening is 2'2". So we'll run R9 right up to the edge of the 2x rough opening. And then we line the jambs in the head with just standard 7/16 zip. So that way because it doesn't make sense to why put a buck in there and then cover it. Just frame the opening closer and finish it with a piece of zip R.
So your jamb, your head, your sill are all covered.
Let's not talk about the sill yet. The jamb and the head are all covered with 7/16 zip liners in the opening.
Okay.
So basically the concept there is I've cut a hole in the opening just like I would have with a building paper, and I folded it in the opening. I just did it with 7/16 zip. And then I taped the joint. So I maintain continuity of my weather-resistant barrier into the opening on 3 sides. On the sill, and this comes from our discussions with Jake, we take the R9 to the sill, but the rough opening isn't plus 2 inches. It is plus
2 3/4.
2 1/4. Because we add a 2x8, what I call a rip sill, because it has to be ripped because it just doesn't match dimensionally.
Right.
And we put that out. So now we have that 1.5 inch face across the sill of the window, because that has always been problematic is how do I attach the sill? How do I attach this? Because there's nothing to attach there. The jambs in the head, I have the jack that's directly under the 7/16. So in his cause for concern about never having be able to fasten, I now have all 4 sides with a very strong fastening capacity.
Nice.
And then the 2x rough sill, when I flash the sill, the stretch tape just goes out over that and goes down to the zip below.
Okay, so you're specifically addressing European windows. It technically applies. The same methods could be used.
I mean, if
However,
I do an Anderson window, I would do the same thing. The other thing I want to point out,
you would be violating Anderson's installation instructions then.
I violate a lot of things.
Well, it's important to say that as
never
far as
violated
I
me.
know, thank you, Pete, all of the manufacturers that make flanged windows in the United States who I have read their install instructions when it comes to zip R says you have to do it the way that he's asking. You have to omit the foam. Here is my argument. Don't omit the foam, just cut the entire zip sheathing.
Omit the foam. I don't have on the jam, there's the
Yeah. So my argument is instead of cutting the foam out and letting the zip still fly to the edge of the opening and then having the buck like he's designing, don't cut it 1.5 inches, cut it 2 inches and just cut the entire zip sheathing back and use a wider tape to cover that. And now you've skipped cutting part of the foam. You're cutting the sheet goods at 2 different depths. You have to cut it from the back. No, you can chalk a line and cut everything from the front, then put a 2x in and then do the 6-inch seam tape over top of all of it.
So Huber, I believe, says knock yourself out. There's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but hold on. Because if I cut that back on the jams, then I'm also taking a significant amount of shear strength out of that.
Well, you're still connected to the king. You're not connected to the jack
but I'm only
at that
connected
point.
to the king by a 1/2 inch. If I do what you just said.
No. 2 inches for the depth of a zip R9 was the question. So it's 1.5 inches
so you
wide.
could just do a buck and you could just nail it to the king. But I would rather violate the Anderson window install, bring the foam all the way to the edge of the jack, line the opening, and have 3 inches of nailing capacity for that shear panel and be able to stagger the joints. It's
But this is one of those, something has to be the worst part of the house. Like if you're in production mode and you're trying to do this as cost effectively as possible, do you have enough scraps on the whole job to line all those jams? Is it easier to just cut back?
You don't necessarily even have to line them, right? If you could just up the expense and go to like a 8-inch wide flashing tape, turn the corner and just let the flashing be the jam liner.
Sure.
And not add the inch and do the zip. I just like having the zip there, and then we just use their 3-inch tape. But the other thing I was going to say is the rip sill, when it falls short, one thing that we just learned on the build show build is when I do the back dam, I bump the back dam up to 5/4 stock because it goes behind there, and we cantilever that over the rip sill and make it flush with the jack. So now I have a 1-inch strip to catch the drywall on the inside with that. So I don't really care that the rough sill falls 3/16 inch short in the opening. I just bridge that with the drywall.
So this is
a lot of stuff to talk in thin air. Can we post a photo with any of this?
I bet Steve
I could sell a detail.
That's what I was about to say.
Send $1.
I was going to say the exact same thing. I bet Steve has a detail that you would get if you paid for a set of plans.
Anybody wants to buy a set of plans?
Just so we're clear, if Steve quotes you a price on what the plans are, I will sell you the ones that we already have for half that.
And then I can sue Jake for copyright infringement.
And I have a business in the Social Republic of Vermont where you can get them all for free.
But I think we've answered his question.
We have. And what's funny is doing these cold, this question's from Dan. My question is regarding window and door rough openings. When you look through Huber's literature, they simply say tape the RO as normal and don't worry about the exposed foam. I see details online of folks using plywood or lumber to make a window buck, essentially to protect the foam edge in these openings. Best practice or not, is it worth worrying about? We've done it both ways. We've had success with both ways. I think there's a budget conversation. There's a risk conversation. There's who's installing the windows. Is that piece of tape that's just protecting that soft foam that can give when you go to shove the window in? It's allowable.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that we would do
tell
it.
Dan to talk to Steve, the previous guy?
We tell Dan to talk to Steve. That's correct.
Yeah, wasn't the previous guy
So,
Steve?
yes, I believe so.
That's what we do.
Oh, no, Jason L. We need to connect Dan and Jason.
Yeah.
That's what we do here at the UnBuild It podcast. We knit the
connections.
industry together.
We
should give out Dan's phone number then.
There you go.
Don't include your phone number.
I thought people referred to us as nutters, not knitters.
You're a buckethead.
Everybody loves a
Is that a term of
callback.
endearment?
Now we have to publish things in a certain order so that
So they
joke
can get the
makes
joke,
sense.
right?
Yeah.
It's all right.
Okay, let's see. This is from Jeff. Let's see.
Hi, Jeff.
I should always start with I absolutely love the content and banter of your podcast parts that I've been skipping. That's my favorite part.
Well, that guy said that other guy didn't like the fact that you hate the military.
He didn't say that. He just noted that he thinks that I do. My builder has never used zip sheathing, and it would be a custom order where I'm building. No framing subcontractor in our market has used it either. My builder is a fan of spray foam. This guy's got to be in Texas, right? Yeah, rural East Texas. There we go. I'm thinking of using normal OSB sheathing since that product is everywhere and everyone knows it, and plan on taping the seams myself using John Straub's exterior insulation method from a fine home building article that he wrote on Retrofit. Then the 2x6 cavity, I'll use Rockwool R23. Would I need a WRB, or would the 2 inches of closed cell foam act as the WRB?
So the 2 inches of polyiso?
He says closed cell foam. Sorry, I should have read the questions beforehand, I guess. What he's trying to say is the builder wants to use foam. Could we also stuff with Rockwool? If we use the foam, it appears, this is what he's saying, if we use the foam on the inside of the cavities, does that count as a WRB?
No.
That's a simple answer.
Yeah, that's pretty.
The other thing that I want to point out in reading that is he says we just use OSB. One of the things I think that the industry doesn't understand is that the recipe for OSB is a proprietary one, and that all OSBs, like a lot of people say, well, I'm just going to use regular OSB and not zip. It's not a one-for-one exchange that you've just released the weather-resistant barrier when you buy a commodity OSB. The whole makeup of that panel, the glues that are used, the type of glues, the amounts and quantities of all of those.
Technically, Advantech
totally
is OSB.
Different. Yeah.
And nobody would look at that and go, it's OSB. They would go, oh, that's something different. Well, it is. It is.
And Advantech is exponentially better than zip as far as how it gets made, I believe, from a durability aspect, because it has to be.
Different amount of the MDI binder, different amount of paraffins. Yeah, it is a different product.
But it has to be.
And interestingly, if you use moisture properties for quote unquote average OSB, that's all over the place. You know, the wet cup and the dry cup test for different types of OSB varies considerably.
Well, there's a lot of OSB that gets made for the agricultural community. That's not even the building community.
Yeah.
Really?
That is made for just like
Barns
basically
or stable
barns
walls
or throwaway and stuff.
I didn't know that.
A lot of people go to like Menards or these places and they buy OSB and say, "Oh wow, look at it, it's $40 a sheet there, but it's only $12.99 a year a sheet. Let me buy that." And they think OSB is OSB.
And the guy running the register at the home center doesn't give a hoot what you're buying it for. He doesn't even know.
He brings it up. So
Interesting.
If we're inferring Jeff's question correctly, no, the insulation has nothing to do with the WRB. The taping of the OSB would be an air control issue, not a water control issue. While it does stop some water.
It's a crappy weather-resistant barrier. How's that?
So
The exterior surface of the OSB?
Yes. It's not one that we would approve, but there's no doubt that if I spray water on it and I have the joints taped,
Some of it will
It won't meet code.
correct.
You have to have
Correct.
a dedicated WRB.
Well,
Okay.
first of all, East Texas, rural East Texas. Is there a code? No, I'm just kidding. So, yes, if you're doing a 2x6 wall like that, you very easily could tape the seams in an attempt to control air, insulate on the inside with Rockwool or spray foam, whatever your contractor is most comfortable with. And then depending on what you insulate the cavity with, choose a weather resistant barrier that has the correct permeability that your crew is able to install. But I would make an argument, if you're concerned and they are refusing to use zip or something that has a fully adhered membrane, you, instead of taping all the seams, should just buy a good quality roll-on product and create a monolithic barrier on the outside.
Or just put up 1 inch of foil-faced polyiso.
Okay,
And
tape the joints.
I wanted to make sure we got to that, because let's assume that either in place of, or he actually means, no, I'm putting continuous rigid insulation on the outside. Can I use the outside surface of any rigid insulation as my weather-resistant barrier base? And the real issue is going to be, you can, but the taping is the big issue. Taping to the reflective foil of polyiso is not easy. And taping to either XPS or EPS is also really challenging.
And now we're into a situation where we're asking our framers that have never, and our builder that have never worked with zip before, to do exterior insulation and corrected window installs too.
And at every flashed opening, it's going to be even more difficult to get it done right.
You get zip R6, put it on the wall, and call it a day.
Also, no matter where you live, I'm guessing in the United States, there's probably a rep for Huber if you wanted to use Zip R.
Yeah, West Texas, I can't imagine.
Rural East Texas, sorry.
Rural East Texas, so we can get zip out there.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Okay, we always have a stack of questions, and in a Q&A session, we have a tendency to get through 2 or 3. I love the Q&As. We hope that you guys
we really enjoy them.
like the Q&As.
Speak for yourself. I hate them.
Okay. Is that because people write the questions?
I just don't like people interfering with my podcast.
Okay. So you heard it here first. Steve's not a big fan of our listeners.
That's worse than hate the military.
Frustrated by your existence and your ability to email questions at unbuilditpodcast.com.
These were really good questions.
These were. And there was some really good, insightful, challenging discussions there about which way do we want to do things. And I think that the conclusion we came to on each one of those topics is there are a million different ways to skin the cat, and you have to understand the risks to decide which way you're going to do it.
And by the way, if you skin the cat, there's no WRB on that cat anymore.
No, and that cat's probably not going to be happy either. I think we're going to call it right there. We have a full stack. Maybe we'll press stop, press record again, and
keep our listeners hungry.
Do we have a resource?
Pete's. How about we give we'll give a little love to John Straub in the Fine Home Building article. It's Energy Retrofits: 6 Proven Ways to Build an Energy Smart Wall by John Straub.
Cool.
So, and I think that
I'm on it.
I think I kind of speak for both of you guys as well. If John Straub signed his name to it, you probably can believe what's in it as well.
You know what?
Both an academic and a field guy, which is the best combination.
Do you guys know how to make a hot dog roll?
How?
Don't put any sticky mustard on it. So
Put it on a hill.
put it on the hill. You know, you hit a pinnacle on the last episode. This is a bit of a slide.
Okay, then do you know how to make a Kleenex dance? You put a little boogie in it. You're welcome, Peter. On that note, forget that those 2 jokes were told and leave us a review based on the rest of the episode. Don't forget
we should come out with our UnBuild It podcast joke book.
Okay.
You heard him volunteer here.
We are now publishing our own literature. Till next time, thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to leave us a review. Gentlemen,
Bye-bye.
thanks for joining me.
See ya.